I work at a haunted gas station in Ohio. The rules will terrify you. I never should have opened that door. The moment I stepped into the gas station on the edge of town, a chill swept through me, like a cold finger tracing my spine. The glow from the flickering fluorescent lights did little to push back the darkness creeping in from the corners. This place was different. I could feel it. My routine was the same most nights. Check the pumps, stock the shelves, serve the occasional customer. But tonight felt off. I could hear whispers, soft, barely audible sounds that flitted around me, just out of comprehension. The air was thick with something I couldn't quite name. Fear, or maybe just an unease that settled deep in my bones. Each tick of the clock echoed like thunder in my ears. I glanced around, the shadows casting strange shapes on the walls. My heart raced, each beat a reminder that I was alone in this eerie tomb of a gas station. The smell of oil and stale coffee filled my nostrils, mixing with something pungent and rotten, as if the very walls were decaying. Then came the sounds. A soft thud like something heavy being dragged across the floor. I froze, eyes widening. My mind raced. Was something gear with me? A glance towards the back room revealed nothing but darkness. I rubbed my eyes, hoping the shadows would fade, that I was just imagining things. But they didn't. They lingered, just out of sight, like the harbingers of doom. That I wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans, but they didn't help. It felt like the temperature had plunged. My breath came out in little puffs, visible in the air. The fluorescent bulbs buzzed angrily, and suddenly, the lights dimmed before flaring back to life, casting grotesque silhouettes around me. It felt like a warning, but of what? Every little creak of the floorboards sounded more pronounced. I thought I saw a movement, the flick of something darting from one aisle to another, but when I turned, it was gone. Just shadows playing tricks on my tired mind. Right. A heavy silence fell, suffocating and thick. Then, out of the blue, the door to the cooler swung open with a slow, deliberate creak. There was no wind, no draft, only me standing there, heart hammering in my chest like a wild animal trying to escape. I peered inside, the cold air hitting my face, feeling far too cold for the sweltering heat of the night. Empty. But why did it feel like someone was watching me? A prickling sensation danced across my skin. I turned sharply. Nothing. Just shadows. My breath caught. Was I losing my mind? Then came the singing. Soft, haunting, laced with an unnerving quality that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It dripped like honey from the lips of someone just beyond the walls, mocking and inviting. My body screamed for me to run, but I was frozen, a deer in headlights. I stepped back, tripping over my own feet, stumbling into the display of snacks. They tumbled to the ground with a cacophony. I felt exposed, vulnerably an animal cornered. And just like that, a figure loomed in the doorway. A shadow, tall and elongated, wrapped in darkness. My heart plummeted, a lump rising in my throat. Who are you? I managed to croak out, fear thick and heavy. Then darkness swallowed the light, and the world around me blackened. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The darkness churned, a living entity that seemed to whisper secrets just out of reach. I couldn't see my hands in front of my face, and the oppressive silence pressed against my ears, bringing an unbearable weight to the air. My mind went into overdrive. Was I truly alone, or had something terrible emerged from the shadows? When the lights flickered back to life, I wasn't in the same place. The gas station felt larger, more twisted, an impossible distortion of the familiar. I struggled to comprehend what had happened. The aisles stretched out to unsettling lengths, and the shelves seemed to whisper my name, taunting me with the things they held. The snacks I'd knocked over earlier had vanished, replaced by tarnished metal cans, their labels faded and smeared, that I could still hear the distant echoes of that haunting song snaking around me, wrapping me in dread. It echoed from the depths of the back room, where the door lay ajar, revealing a sliver of darkness that seemed to breathe. My instincts screamed at me to bolt, to get as far away as possible from that cursed place. But, as if on a puppet string, I felt myself moving toward the door instead. With each step, the chilling air grew thicker, as though it were filled with an unseen presence. My fingers brushed against the doorframe, and the sudden touch set my nerves ablaze. I pushed the door wide open and held my breath. Choking fear poured into me as I entered the back room. Inside, a single, dim bulb swung from the ceiling, casting erratic shadows that shifted like phantoms. The walls were covered in dark stains. I couldn't tell if they were old rust or something more sinister. In the far corner, a makeshift altar of twisted metal and glass gleamed in the weak light. Within its grip lay remnants of small trinkets, a child's toy, a rusty key, and something that glimmered ominously, a locket that I reached for the locket. A clamoring sound split the silence, the low grinding of metal scraping against metal. My heart pounded in a rhythm that echoed through this nightmare. I was not alone. I whirled around in panic, only to find the back room door slam shut, a cruel punctuation to my dread. The singing intensified, more melodic and haunting than before. My mind raced with fear. Who were they? What did they want from me? I tried to wrench the door open, but it wouldn't budge. The walls loomed closer, almost as if they wanted to crush me between them. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, a primal fight-or-flight response warring within me. Then, from the shadows emerged the figure I'd seen before. It was cloaked in darkness, but now, it seemed to be reaching out to me, its movements fluid, almost welcoming. I could see its features, but they blurred, and every time I thought I had a clear image, it would shift again, like a reflection in water. "Join us," it whispered, the voice a chilling amalgamation of many. It resonated deep in my bones, sending tremors through my core. "You are destined to be one with us." My breath hitched. I was no stranger to terror, but the depth of this predatory calm clawed at me. The sense of wrongness was palpable, a toxic fog creeping into my lungs. I turned, desperate, eyes darting for an escape route in the back room. But the shadows responded to my fear with an onslaught, twisting and curling in a dance that ensnared me. Just as a chilling scream erupted from my throat, the lights flickered violently, plummeting me into another realm of darkness. I could feel cold fingers brushing against my skin, tracing patterns, and I gasped as a luminous visage emerged, brighter than the bulbs overhead. In that split second, reality shifted, a fleeting glimpse of a face filled with despair, eyes wide with eternal sorrow staring back at me. It wore the same locket that lay on the altar. The apparition began to whisper a name, each syllable echoing in a haunting resonance. I couldn't catch it. It was swallowed by the scream of the shadows. And then, everything went cold. The door finally flung open, and I scrambled to escape. But the figure was there, blocking my way, its silhouette gleaming. "You're one of us now," it hissed, and the world spun. Everything turned into chaos, light and shadow merging as I stood there, frozen in fear. And just as suddenly, as if someone had flipped a switch, silence enveloped the room again, thick and suffocating. But then, a chilling realization gripped me. Reflection in the dark window showed not just me, but beside me, a shadow that mirrored my every movement, laughing softly, eyes gleaming with an unholy hunger. The gas station's walls vibrated, like they were alive, chanting my name, urging me to step forward. That I was no longer sure what awaited me on the other side, but the pull was irresistible. As I blinked, the reflection was gone, and all that remained was that dollop of darkness, inching closer, relentlessly beckoning me. What price would I pay to escape this nightmare? Before I could gather my shattered thoughts, an ear-splitting crack of lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating the room, and I gasped as I realized the figure was no longer alone. The shadows had multiplied, surrounding me, their essence absorbing the light, calling out to the depths of my soul. And suddenly, I wasn't alone in the gas station anymore. The shadows undulated like a living mass, coiling around me, aglow with a dim, sinister luminescence that cut through the thick air. I stumbled back, my heart racing as despair and terror clawed at my throat. Each figure bore the same hollow expression, their eyes sunken and void, as if they had been stripped of their very essence. "Join us," they whispered in unison, each resonance digging deeper into my psyche. The long-forgotten nightmares I had successfully buried began to resurface, igniting a flame of horror that spread through me like wildfire. They were not merely shadows. They were remnants of lost souls, twisted and tormented, forever seeking out the semblance of life that I still possessed. I felt a sharp, tugging sensation at my mind, an invasive pull that threatened to unravel my sanity. It felt again as if the gas station itself sighed with hunger. The once familiar store had transformed into an echoing hall of despair, the shelves now swollen with darkness, pulsing gently as though they carried a heartbeat. "Help us," they pleaded, voices crackling like burnt paper. A particularly vivid figure, a child no older than 5 with hollow cheeks and tattered clothes, extended a tiny hand toward me. "You can set us free. We just need more." Panic surged through me, overriding my horror momentarily. "More what?" I shrieked, backing away until my spine pressed against the altar covered in trinkets. "What do you want from me?" "Your light." The chilling whispers drifted impossibly close, the figures' faces suddenly swimming around me, each pleading for solace or revenge. "You have so much light, but you don't understand there's a price." That a sudden blast of freezing air burst through the room, ruffling my hair. I narrowed my eyes against the cold and turned to make a run for the now agape back door, the world outside beckoning me with its warmth only to find another figure blocking my way. This one wore a soot-blackened mask, jagged just where its mouth should be. "Going somewhere?" it crooned, voice low and syrupy. The malicious glee in its tone sent shudders through my spine that I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to fight my way out. But as the shadows surged in closer, I wrestled with the reality of my situation. "I'm sorry," I stammered, pleading more out of desperation than for true remorse. "I can't help you." The child's wail blared louder than the muted echoes of my denial. "You'll have to choose. Light or dark. The cursed must be fed." Its face twisted in a grotesque smile, and the more I focused, the more familiar I felt its pull, as if it had once been someone dear to me. I clutched the locket tightly, its cool surface grounding me for a moment. I had to know more, to dig deeper. There was something here I needed to uncover, a truth lurking just beyond the grasp of my understanding. I threw back my shoulders and faced the taunting mass of shadows. "What happened to you?" "I can't help unless I know your story." The shadows pulsed violently, their forms now taking on a more defined shape as they drew closer, amalgamating into a swirling vortex that enveloped the altar. "You seek answers, but answers come at a cost. What are you willing to give?" "What?" I gasped, the air in the room thickening like molasses, suffocating my thoughts. "I don't have anything to give." Laughter erupted from every corner, a cacophony of voices spiraling into an echoing frenzy. "You have more than you think," they shrieked before an unseen force surged towards me, flinging me to the ground. As I hit the floor, the dim light flickered and lapsed again into chaotic shadows that I rolled over, desperate to find the door, but everything around me had transformed. The walls pulsed with life, showing images of countless lost spirits mingling with the fleeting visions of my own past. Each whisper carried a name, a betrayal, a desperate plea for life. And then I found myself staring into the reflection of the locket's surface shimmering, revealing my face alongside the faces of those I had tortured in my memories. They each bore expressions of fury and sorrow, mouths forming silent screams that crawled beneath my skin. "Feed us." The voices intensified once more, clamoring for recognition, their shadows projecting against the walls, contorting into spirals of agony and vengeance. In that moment, amid their relentless demands, a terrible realization pierced through me was more connected to this hellish prison than I could ever have fathomed. As I staggered to my feet, shadows lunged, grasping at my legs, pulling me inexorably toward the altar. I fought back, the screams intensifying, but with each moment, I felt the hold of the past tightening around me, wrapping like chains fastened with the rust of memories long buried. When my gaze flicked back to the altar, I noticed something. The glowing locket was pulsing in sync with my heart. And suddenly, amidst the chaos, a new figure emerged, one that drew my breath, the glowing silhouette of a woman bearing an unmistakable resemblance to me, eyes piercing through me like daggers. "You must choose," it bellowed, a voice echoing with an authority that silenced the screams. And the moment hung in the air, thick and impenetrable. The darkness was rising, and I could sense the final answer was just out of reach, tangled within the fabric of the gas station's cursed history. Strike! A sudden explosion of light shot through the building, illuminating the horror that stood around me. As I shielded my eyes from the incandescent rays, I felt a surge of energy course through the shadows. They recoiled, now encircling someone. As the spectacle of light dimmed, I finally saw. It was a reflection, a forgotten part of me, tethered to every soul that begged for redemption. And with this realization, I understood what the shadows craved. No. I shouted, horrified. But the howling had grown unbearable, and with the last sparkle of the locket dimming into the void, I felt my very essence begin to unravel, caught in the crossfire of horrors that awaited. That I had to choose. But it wasn't just my fate that teetered on the edge. The souls cried out, and darkness loomed, promising a reckoning I may not survive. Before I could respond, the light vanished as quickly as it had appeared. I was left alone in an unbroken blackness, and the whispers became screams of pure terror. The silence returned, suffocating and palpable, as I felt something cold grasp my ankle. Welcome back, came the nasally hiss from the dark, and before I could react, the shadows surged forward to join me, tearing my scream into the darkness as it melted away. And in that moment, the gas station vibrated with a timeless hunger, and I understood I had brought more than myself back from the brink. The rules had changed, and now I was part of something infinitely darker, forever entwined in its grip. The world began to coalesce around me once again, an eerie illumination flickering to life like gasping breath. The shadows, instead of receding, twisted and writhed closer in their insatiable hunger, engulfing me in darkness. I felt the temperature plummet as they tightened their hold. With every breath, the memories of departed lives clawed at my thoughts, a damning reminder of my ties to this cursed ground. Suddenly, amidst the suffocating despair, a new voice resonated, a low, guttural laugh that reverberated through the very walls of the gas station. You awaken the hunger within us, it sneered, the slithering tone laced with malice. Now you must either surrender your light or join our ranks. Panic shot through me, igniting my desire to escape and flee into the outside world that felt so achingly close. I clawed at the ground, scrambling to inch backwards, but the voices swirled louder, chaotic whispers demanding attention. I could no longer discern individual pleas among the cacophony. They escalated to a fever pitch that rattled my bones and filled my ears with an ominous hum, drowning out my reason. Then I saw a flicker of a neon light, almost teasing me with its false promise of freedom. It was the gas station sign, malfunctioning above my head. The flickering illuminations of open and closed intertwined, casting my shadow like a warning behind me, taunting, beckoning. I had to reach it. Help us, cried the child's voice again, more insistent, more desperate. It echoed memories I had fought hard to forget. I felt the edges of my sanity slip as my gaze flicked back between the glowing sign and the mourning masses surrounding me, each parched and pleading. You can't leave us. You have to help us live again. No. I didn't want to help them, didn't want to become ensnared in whatever unholy pact was binding us here. The shadows loomed like a gaping maw, threatening to consume the last light I had left and pull me into their abyss. I slammed my eyes shut, focusing on the warmth of the sun, the touch of life that seemed eons away. The ominous laughter returned, closer this time. You have until sunrise, it rasped, savoring each word as if tasting them for flavor. Before then, if you cannot choose, we will take all that remains of you. Forever. The weight of their curse pressed against me, suffocating much like the haunting presence of my own past. I had to figure out what made this gas station a breeding ground for the forsaken. With a surge of desperate courage, I opened my eyes and frantically reached for the wall. The surface shook beneath my fingers, rippling like an ocean tide, concealing secrets buried deep. Tell me, I yelled, my voice cracking with desperation. What do you want? What is this place? They answered not with words, but with sound an unmistakable, agonizing scream that resonated within the foundation itself. The cries morphed into one dirge-like melody, building to a crescendo as the very fabric of the station seemed to vibrate with their agony. The shadows surged, racing toward the altar with a ferocious intensity. "Join us!" They roared in unison, and I suddenly felt a searing pain in my chest, as if they wanted to tear my essence out me. Breath quickened, panic clawing at my throat once more. I grasped the locket, hoping it still possessed the power to guide me. The haunting light glimmered faintly, but it felt dim, fading even as my terror mounted. "What do you need from me?" I whispered, pressing it against my heart. Suddenly, with the blinding intensity of a storm, the shadows retreated as if struck by an unseen force. A swirling mass formed at the altar, coalescing into a vision that emerged from the darkness, a picture embedded in the soul of the gas station. There it was, a flash of what had been. Smiling faces, laughter echoing, children playing alongside their families. Life coursing through this very ground. But the joyful scene twisted grotesquely. Darkness seeped in like an infection, and screams erupted that turned the laughter into wails. The ground opened up as figures clawed upward, dirt and anguish, combining as they pulled at the mirage that had once been home. "No, stay back," I shouted, but the vision swallowed me whole. I spiraled into the depths, disoriented and weightless, wafts of memories crashing against my consciousness like waves upon the shore. Faces of people I had wronged hovered close, their eyes trained on me, pulsating with wrath and sorrow. "Choose," they chanted, pushing me toward the precipice of my memories, toward a truth I had long avoided. The locket flared to life, illuminating a single moment, an unbearable memory seething with guilt, the loss of a loved one I couldn't bear to confront, woven deeply into the fabric of this cursed station. "No," I gasped, the horror of my own sin crashing over me like a tide. And then I realized. This place was a mirror, forced to reflect the deepest regrets of every soul caught within its clutches. They wanted not just to exist, but to extract a Piscean unveiling of my darkest fear. As the shadows surged closer, the cries began anew, collapsing into a symphony of chaos. "Your light, your choice," they howled, their voices amalgamating into a single dissonant roar that reverberated through the gas station. Desperation surged within. May had to confront the darkness I carried, or I would become one more lost shade haunting this desolate realm. Just then, the flickering light overhead died, plunging me into stifling darkness. And in that moment, I felt a hand, cold and clammy, wrap around my wrist, pulling me down into the abyss. "Join us," the whisper coiled around my consciousness, entwining with the fear in my heart, as I plunged deeper into the void, an inevitable fate dragging me toward the terrible truth. The gas station trembled, the shadows roared, and I understood it wasn't simply fighting for my life. I was trapped in a never-ending cycle of damnation. With a final, resounding echo of terror, I prepared to confront my own shadow, but as I did, everything shattered. A blinding flash erupted around me. And then, silence. A faint reminder lingered, a haunting resonance echoing my name. "Help us," but as the darkness enveloped me once more, I could feel the emergence of something far worse. The gas station had awakened, and it demanded a sacrifice. The gas station loomed before me, a vast maw holding darkness tighter within its grasp. A wail echoed from the depths, reverberating as if the structure itself bled anguish. I struggled against the pull of the icy fingers gripping my wrist, my pulse racing as dread pooled in my stomach. The fragile glow of the locket flickered weakly, a lighthouse battling an encroaching storm, casting odd shadows that twisted and morphed like phantoms longing to break free. Then, with a sudden snap, the grip on my wrist released, and I stumbled forward, crashing onto the floor of the gas station. The screech of despair turned into a chorus of frantic whispers. They danced around me, teasing from the darkness, a fluid entity coiling through the air. "You have awakened us. Now savor the memories that plague you." The shadows slithered closer, and from their ranks emerged a figure, cloaked in billowing darkness, a child, no older than 8, with hollow eyes that seemed to absorb all light. Its lips curled into a contorted smile, a grotesque parody of innocence. "Did you come to play?" It chimed sweetly, but the laughter that followed sent waves of horror crawling down my spine. "We haven't had a friend in so long." My breath hitched, instinctively drawing backwards, but the weight of 1,000 memories held me in place. This child was not like those I had imagined. They bore the harrowing evidence of suffering eyes that betrayed unquenchable sorrow, lines etched into its young face by the burdens of loss. "No, please," I croaked, forcing my voice through the chokehold of fear. "I'm not your friend. I can't help you." "Help?" The child's laughter twisted, growing sharp and painful as the shadows swirled, encircling me. "But you already have. Every step you take brings us closer to freedom, to life. We want to feel it again, just once more before the end." Around me, faces began to emerge from the abyss, pale and gaunt. Each one resembled the busy patrons I once saw navigating the aisles or fueling their cars. Now, they wore the haunted look of their own demise. Their mouths opened in unison, a chorus of lingering despair. "Join us, feel our pain, embrace our hunger." The voices melded into a disturbing harmony, tugging at the corners of my mind, relentless. My heart thundered as I pressed my hands against my ears, begging for an end to their maddening calls. "Stop! You're all dead. This place belongs to the living, not to shadows." With that, the child stepped forward. Its breaths were shallow, shaky, barely resembling the cadence of life. "But we were alive here. This is our home. We were taken by the darkness that lives beneath. All we want is our light back. Join us as we feast on the joy you carry." As the child spoke, tendrils of shadow began to reach out, probing for me, seeking to intertwine with my essence. "No." My scream shattered the moment as I flung my hands wide, casting the shadows away, but the vibrations of my actions only seemed to energize them, sending a ripple throughout the gas station. The walls creaked in response, almost voicing their agreement. Eager to fight? The atmosphere thickened, closing in on me like a noose. Even the flicker of the fluorescent bulbs above dimmed, as if cowering from the tension mounting in the air. "You cannot escape what you've invited." Just as I began backing towards the door, desperate for any semblance of sanctuary, a sudden crash resonated from behind the counter. The source was a heavy, rusted safe, grinding open as if compelled by unseen hands. My heart raced at the sight, the contents spilling onto the ground like an offering from the abyss. As I stepped closer, the hairs on my neck stood on end. There, among the shriveled remnants of long-ago transactions, lay an old, dust-covered photograph. I couldn't help but pick it up. My heart dropped. It depicted a family of 4, each face graced with a joy that felt alien to this cursed place. Beneath, spidery handwriting traced a chilling message. "We were last seen here." A sudden rush of winds, howling like a legion of souls, burst through the gas station doors as the lights flickered violently. The figures that surrounded me began to thrash, faces morphing into anguished masks, their eyes glistening with a hunger so raw it sent ice coursing through my veins. "You must join us. You must feel the weight of our sorrow," they pleaded, voices blending into a desperate roar, echoing off the wrecked walls. I clutched the photograph like a lifeline, my mind racing. If this family had vanished, perhaps they possessed the key to breaking the curse. Pressing my palms to the cold counter, frantic thoughts tangled in a web of despair, I shouted into the darkness, "What do you want from me?" The shadows froze, the air thickening with silence, and for a heartbeat, hope flickered. Perhaps the weight of my pain could satisfy their torment. But just as clarity emerged, an anguished scream sliced through the darkness. The gas station's walls heaved and buckled, a portal tearing open in the floor at my feet, an invitation to plunge deeper into reckoning or despair. The child smiled wider, a malicious glint igniting in its eye. "You wanted to know, so ask us. But you must sacrifice what you truly love in return." The wall of shadowed figures surged, and with them surged the impossible truth. I was teetering on the brink of oblivion, decisions pressed against my heart as the ground quaked beneath me. The safe's contents shifted, a key now spinning within my grasp, pulsating with energy as shadows coiled around my legs. And at that moment, choices displayed like a macabre collage of promises and loss, a glimpse into my own heart and what I would lose forever. The gas station trembled in anticipation, dark laughter reverberating in the air, and all I could think was how I had been drawn into their manipulative embrace, the hunger now merging with my own truths. And before I could even take a step to flee, I understood. As hope flickered and fear clashed, something unimaginable awaited beneath the very ground I stood upon. The darkness erupted forth, gaping wide like a chasm deep, insatiable where buried lies awaited. As I was swept toward the abyss, a final voice echoed through the chaos. Sacrifice must begin. And then everything went black. Awakening in an inky void, I felt as though I were suspended in an endless expanse, the absence of sound pressing down around me like a heavy shroud. Panic clawed its way up my throat as I searched for anything solid, grasping for the familiar warmth of reality. But a cacophony of whispers enveloped me, each tone a thread of despair entangled with the longing for life. "Welcome back," they breathed, a chorus echoing from the very depths of my soul. With a sudden jolt, memories flickered before my eyes like ghostly images battling through a film of static images of smiling faces that felt achingly distant. The child appeared first, its twisted smile the sole illumination within the darkness. "You weren't ready to join us," it taunted, the shadows flaring in delight around it. "But you are no longer alone. We have beckoned more." Before I could fully comprehend those words, shadows poured torrentially from all sides, monstrous forms colliding and merging into grotesque parodies of the gas station's former patrons. They loomed above me, writhing and howling, their anguished cries amplifying the terror that coursed through my veins. "We are the ones who remain," one figure rasped, shifting into a familiar shape, the gas station owner, looking torn and mangled, eyes wide with a silent plea. "You must listen." The depths of my mind recoiled. I had witnessed these horrors beneath layers of plastic smiles and casual conversations. I had seen fleeting honesty in the eyes of these souls. Is it what I became a part of unwittingly? The last vestiges of outdoor light flickered, as if sensing that night's darkness had spilled its secrets upon my body. Clinging painfully to me that I in panic, I shook my head, fighting against the tide of memories as the shadows whispered promises of freedom and laughter lost. "What do you want?" I shouted into the leaden air, aching with dread. Shadows coiled tighter, breath hot, and fetid against my skin. They feasted in silence, sated but ominous, urgently pleading for the one thing they craved. "You must pull someone from the depths," a voice cooed inside the whirlwind of shadow, serpentine and insistent. "Choose wisely, for one touch shall grant your wish, while another shall tether you to anguish forever." Sinking to my knees within the inky void, overwhelmed by the cacophony pressing in, I wrestled with that enticing notion. What had become of those who had disappeared? Were their souls wandering in this limbo, tethered to the gas station like marionettes forever chained? The photograph still clutched in my fingers flickered to life, the faces glowing with warmth, love spilling from their eyes. They urged me to rescue them, to bring forth their joy from the depths of despair. But would I be capable of paying the price? "Look, there." The child's voice rang in my ears, pulling me towards a shimmering pool that appeared like liquid night. It rippled with the energy of the station's victims, yearning to escape. I breathed in the heavy atmosphere around me, a desperate urgency igniting deep within. With heart racing, I inched toward the pool, knowing my every move was scrutinized by an unseen audience. At that moment, clarity surged through me. I understood now. This was not merely a rescue, it was a cruel game, and I would be forced to play it. "You can pull one up." But, came the child's sing-song voice, now laced with something dangerously teasing. "Only one will make it out alive." Like iron filings drawn to a magnet, a spectral glow began to shimmer amidst the shadows. The place held the crux of my torment. I in that deathly stillness. Ripples of hope trembled in the pool, calling to me. But as I reached toward it, a new voice pierced my thoughts, a disembodied whisper radiating doubt. "Every decision comes at a cost. Are you willing to sever a bond to save another? Those you choose will not be grateful. They will feel the selfishness of your choice." The faces within the pool twisted and contorted, a blend of longing and terror, drawing me further into the depths of anguish. "You'll be left with nothing," they cried, merging into a haunting ballad, each echoing my deepest fears. "That it is your turn to choose," the child exclaimed, its eyes now swirling voids that mirrored the abyss. "Will you save your precious joys or trade one sorrow for another?" With time collapsing around me, the shadows whirled tighter, culture-shocking horror crystallizing as I faced the catalyst for my doom and salvation. The darkness seemed to pulsate, writhing restlessly, As though the silence itself waited, my fingers hovered just above the surface of the pool, the choice of whom to save looming heavily in my heart. With the ghost screaming desperately behind me, I realized the shadows were not seeking mere blood, they wanted my hope extinguished, and I stood as a vessel for their brutal games. Terror bubbled within my chest, forcing me to make a choice. Suddenly, the sensation of cold fingers clasping mine felt all too real. Sacrifice your love. Choose. And I saw Ida's final vision darting across my mind. The faces of those I had loved fleeting like wildflowers caught in a storm. Then, before I could decide, a dark figure surged forth from the depths, the smoke solidifying in the form of a monstrous shadow, the faces of the lost distorting into something grotesque, a slithering amalgam of their sorrow grappling for release. You must decide now, it bellowed, reaching out with tendrils, craving to consume my very essence. The portal closes, and with it your last chance, I inhaled sharply, my heart pounding with the weight of consequence. But in the midst of my hesitation, I could feel the void growing deeper, the darkness hungry for a price that must be paid. And then, from somewhere far beyond the void, I heard a child scream. The scream pierced through the layer of despair like glass shattering, and the tendrils of the monstrous shadow recoiled slightly, momentarily distracted by the sound of my heart in upheaval. It was a pleading cry, raw and haunting, resonating with a desperation that drew me in. Oh, that was not right. It was a call from the darkness that waited, the abyss tapping into the one part of me still desperately clinging to hope. Did you hear it? The child's voice was sharp now, shaky with excitement and fear. Beneath the pain, there's still a chance. But that chance is slipping. The silhouettes surrounding me surged forward, writhing like a boiling cauldron, eager participants in the impending horror that I looked back at the pool, where faces emerged and merged, mouths open in continuous silent screams, their eyes wide with unfulfilled desires. They were caught in some cyclical torment, trapped in a realm where expectancy had long turned into agony. My breath quickened, the air thickening with dread and malice. It felt as if the very shadows were pulling me toward the decision I had long feared pushed to choose, but torn apart by the implications such a choice would hold. Will it be the ones you love, or the price of leaving the broken behind? The child stepped closer, dark skin glistening in the faint glow of the pool, its smile lingering with horrific enticement. Hurry now, they don't have forever. The shadows around me seemed to murmur doubts, dark thoughts creeping like vines, coiling around my resolve. I thought of the last time I had seen my mother, her weary smile shadowed by the burden she bore. She had promised to stay strong for me, but had she forsaken herself in doing so? And yet, I grappled with the memory of the child lost to Maya's small body swallowed by a flood of shadows beneath the very beams that supported the gas station. Choose, echoed the shadow, pressing forth, its multitude of forms shifting cruelly. The pool began to ripple violently as I hesitated, its surface bubbling with spectral faces clawing to break free, each longing face rendered unrecognizable by the chaos and agony. The ringing in my ears intensified, a new sound rising sharply, a chorus of anguished voices echoing what could be called a truth far darker. There is no salvation in your choice. There is only your hurt. I shook my head violently, barreling through my resolve. I would not weigh the light of one against another. I could not. But then I felt Ida twinge deep in my chest, an insistent push from the darkness that made it clear the absence of choice would lead to my own despair. Suddenly, another scream I recognized erupted, reverberating through the air, a cry that turned the blood in my veins to ice. Help me! It was my mother. The shadows twisted around me with fervent delight, guffawing as confusion spread upon my face. They relished the development, their whispers growing louder as if feeding off my dread. She is sinking. Choose quickly. The child's voice taunted, coming close now, its presence overwhelming. The energy surged around me, warping my vision into a kaleidoscope of shadowy amalgamations. Those I loved beckoned with ethereal hands, but their forms morphed into jarring reflections, dreadful shadows that appeared emotionless and grotesque. My heart raced, beating like a drum signaling impending doom. Please, I screamed, reaching out toward the voices, yearning for something solid that I could grasp. Someone help me. but the shadows tightened their grip. Who do you wish to save? The echo voiced, crooning as if to sedate my anxiety. The ground trembled beneath me, the pool's surface cracking. Cascading waves shot forth like shadows reaching for sunlight. Time twisted in on itself as the whispers turned into howls, the shadowy forms straining toward the collapsing pool. The darkness pulsed as I sensed it had begun to devour whatever glimmers of hope remained within. The last thing I saw before desperation overtook logic was a face emerging, one I recognized all too well, an echo of forgotten laughter and warmth. It was the visage of the lost child, whose smile had once brought joy beneath the gas station's neon glow. Help, it mouthed silently, impossibly distorted by the chaos swirling around. Just as I extended a trembling hand in its direction, I felt a ripping at the corners of my Minda, force tugging, almost demanding, fragments of my very essence as the shadows roared with delight. And then, in that shattered moment, two figures erupted from the depths of the night, the spectral forms of my mother and the lost child, spiraling toward each other with a frantic energy that shook the darkness to its core. My heart clenched as if caught in a vice, knowing I could directly reach one, but that the other would remain trapped unless I chose. Choose, the child commanded, now a harbinger of terror, its voice a siren's song inviting doom. The pool yawned wide, a maw of despair, as the bonds of time began to shred apart. I could hear their cries mingling with the haunted laughter of the shadows that surrounded me. Decide, or pay the price for the indecisive. The ground shuddered violently, and my world spun into a vortex of chaos, a final plea ringing in the darkness as I gripped the edge of the abyss with both hands. And then, just before I could resolve my choice, the screams shifted to a cacophony of laughter, and the shadow surged, dragging both figures into its pitiless sepulchre of regret and lost love. The portal snapped shut, an echoing finality resonating through the void. All was silent once again, and the shadows quieted, their hunger sated for the moment. In the eerie stillness, as I knelt broken upon the ground, new shadows began to form around me, hovering, merging, and twisting into warped versions of those I had lost, slowly creeping toward me as one sinister silhouette whispered, "You've brought them to us. Now your real suffering begins." My heart stopped as those familiar forms lunged forward, ravaging through the darkness with malevolence no longer bound by their earthly ties. And in that horrific instant, I realized the haunting truth. I had not merely chosen to save, I had sealed the fate of the living. Suddenly, I felt ice-cold fingers wrap around my throat, squeezing tightly, filling my mind with an overwhelming fear that I was about to become just another whisper in the gas station's long list of the damned. And then came a voice, one final scream that echoed through the night, where the darkness swallowed it whole. The oppressive silence lingered, thick as the fog that clung to the gas station's dimly lit exterior. I gasped for air, my pulse racing as the cold grip on my throat tightened, squeezing the very essence of my being. Panic flared within me, igniting a fight-or-flight instinct that coursed through my veins. In the shadows around me, the grotesque figures morphed and twisted, mocking my fear with their despondent expressions. I struggled against the invisible hands, clawing at my neck in a futile effort to free myself. Every breath was a battle against the weight of despair that hung in the air, saturated with the scents of stale gasoline and the corroding remnants of memories I desperately sought to forget. The laughter of shadows filled my ears, a distorted symphony of torment that urged me to surrender. Within the depths of my panic, shimmering figures danced just beyond the edges of my vision, blurred faces contorted into the pain-inflected visages of the lost. I recognized them. They were trapped souls, ensnared in the same nightmare I now found myself in. They reached out, their ghostly hands stretching toward me, but although I yearned to pull them from the grasp of the abyss, I could feel the undertow of darkness threatening to pull me under as well. "Stay with us," a whisper floated through the air, chilling me to my core. It was a voice that reverberated with familiarity, the echo of the lost child blending seamlessly with the desolate moans of the others. "You belong with them now. You can't save the living. You've become one of us." The grip around my throat loosened just enough for me to gulp down a pang of air, yet the shadows erupted into malicious laughter, reveling in my suffering. I turned, desperate to flee into the safety of the physical world. But as I staggered backward, the ground became a fluid entity, buckling beneath me in waves, swirling like a black whirlpool threatening to consume everything I held dear. Do you think they are waiting for you? They are, but not as you assume. The shadows united, slithering closer and revealing their true intentions through roiling motion and flickers of familiar faces, each distorted by sorrow and anguish. A figure emerged from the depths, as piercing and sorrowful as my darkest memory as me mother, her form warped and weathered by despair. Mom? The words slipped from my lips like a plea, and her sorrowful gaze met mine. But there was no warmth, no maternal embrace awaited. Her eyes were sunken and frantic, filled with an urgency that curdled my insides. You must run, she whispered, her voice barely a breath above the howling winds of the shadows. They won't stop until they take everything, until you are nothing. Desperation clawed at my heart as the shadows began to close in. Join us. You can't hide, they chorused, their voices melding with the cacophony of frightful recognition. Each specter flashed a twisted semblance of my past, each face a fresh scar embedded within my memory. You have given us power. As my mother's visage began to blur, everything sank deeper into shadows, drawing me into a grotesque dance of past and present. My legs trembled with each step back I took, but the specters pursued me, shimmering like oil in the light, their laughter twisting like razor-thin blades through the tense air. Let go, the dark child whispered with a false inoculation of comfort. It's easier to be one of us. Like a dreadful serpent, the shadows coiled around my feet, urging me to surrender. But as I looked again at the figure of my mother, something sparked deep within me, a fleeting memory of love, strength, a reminder that not all was lost. And oh, I shouted defiantly, feeling the remnants of my humanity surge within me. I pushed against the shadows with all my might, but they only tightened their grasp. Terror clawed at my heart with every cry for help I released. Drowning beneath the chaotic tide of despair that would not relent, in a moment of stark clarity, I saw a path through the swirling storm of darkness, a flicker of light, faint yet undeniable, shimmering on the horizon behind them. I lunged toward that light, my pulse thundering as I fought against the grip of despair. Help! My voice cracked, desperation lacing every syllable. But the shadows hissed their rage, a torrent of rage and fury as they surged forward, desperate to seal my fate. Cease! A voice bellowed, powerful and filled with authority that cut through the chaos like a blade. The spectral forms halted, their vicious whispers falling silent as they recoiled, wretched and fearful. From the depths of the shadows, a towering figure emerged, cloaked in darkness, a being that seemed both grotesque and regal, its voice a haunting melody that reverberated through the night air. The chasm of despair is not yet closed, it warned, its eyes gleaming with darkness. And now a new presence must be tasted. Just as I began to understand the gravity of this unseen predator, it beckoned forward, its skeletal hand curling in my direction, eyes burning with a torrent of hungry anticipation. The darkness roiled and twisted in anticipation, and I felt a familiar dread blooming within me. With a final scream echoing in the gas station that resonated through the very foundation, I was swept off my feet as the tendrils of darkness lunged in that moment. I realized that I was no longer simply trying to escape. I was being drawn into an unspeakable fate far worse than I ever imagined. And as the world slipped from my grasp, I felt myself teetering on the brink of that malevolent abyss, the true horror only just beginning to unfold. The world spun as the shadows engulfed me, and for a heartbeat, it felt as though I was suspended between realities, caught in a tempest of unyielding darkness. The grasp of all-consuming dread tightened around my chest like a vice, and I heard the heartbeat of the gas station thrumming beneath me, alive and ancient. "Welcome," intoned the dark being, its voice a velvety caress dripping with menace. "You've become a reluctant guest in our realm, a bridge between despair and oblivion." Its eyes bored into mine, each heartbeat sending tremors of ice flooding through my veins. "You shall witness what lurks in the corners of this forsaken place." Suddenly, the ground beneath me bucked again, not a mere convulsion, but a full-throated growl rippling through the earth, sending me reeling back. I slammed against the cold, rusted wall of the gas station, the scent of detritus and despair attacking my senses, blurring the thin line between physicality and phantasm. The shadows whispered excitedly, as if hungry for blood, their blood, my blood, whatever essence would keep them alive a moment longer. Tonight, we will share. The instant of the dark figure's delight splintered across the air like a shard of glass. We'll feast upon your fears. With each pulse of the gas station's lifeblood, the walls seemed to warp and waver, revealing fleeting glimpses of unspeakable horrors, faces twisted in agony beneath layers of decay, hands reaching out from within the plaster, mouths agape and silent screams that echoed, a cacophony of despair that chilled my very marrow. Every nightmare I had ever buried surged to the surface, clawing for release. Why are you doing this? My voice came out as a croak, barely piercing the blanket of terror wrapping me in its suffocating embrace. Because you have opened the door, the being hissed, a sinister grin stretching its shadowy features. Your presence calls forth memories, those lost souls who waited for their chance to reclaim what was stolen. You became their vessel. With horror, I realized they were not just memories, they were sentient. Pulsing with life, they manifested into grotesque forms around Melost victims trapped in their eternal cycle of torment. Their eyes held the remnants of humanity, pleading and furious at the same time. In that moment of revelation, a darkness deeper than despair crept into my chest, binding my heart with shackles of regret. I saw them. Each specter was a reflection of my own hidden guilt, the moments I had failed to save others, the shadows of those I loved who had slipped from my grasp. What do you want from me? I screamed into the void, my voice barely echoing. The shadows poured around as if reveled in my anguish, their forms twisting and writhing, enveloping me in a chorus of thoughts and memory as me childhood friend, my pleading neighbor, each face shouting at me for having turned away. But somewhere in that horrid dance of suffering, I felt a flicker of warmth stir against the chill. Someone was fighting to pull me back, a shimmering beacon cutting through the shadows that threatened to consume my very soul. The faces of those I loved flickered again around me, stronger this time. Hope surged through my veins, fighting against the heart-wrenching pressure of despair. Help! I cried, thrusting my hands out toward the light, toward them. Don't let me become one of them. The spectral entities hissed angrily, their talons clawing at the edges of my sanity. The shadows roared in disapproval, suppressing the spark of hope that threatened to ignite my escape. Their anguished faces twisted in fury, but I clung to that flicker as they began to converge, almost like a vortex encircling me, their anger mixing with palpable fear. Shadows whipped around, snack sticks of swirling black, a menace looming larger with every heartbeat. Yield. The dark figure commanded, its voice now an infuriated growl, meant to quell the uprising of love and remembrance which was now forming a barrier between me and the ravenous darkness. You can't escape your fate. Bolstered by courage, I squeezed my eyes shut, focused on the specters of warmth and love, and willed them to fight back. Yet the shadows pressed in, relentless in their hunger. I could feel the warmth bleeding away, replaced by despair's chilling grip, and then it happened. The ground shifted violently, the gas station's structure began to tremble, a sound like thunder echoing in the distance. Something was breaking loose beneath us. The ancient foundation groaned as a crack snaked through the floorboards, threading through the gas pumps, an unearthly presence awakening, something beyond what I could comprehend. The shadows howled, screeching in anger and fear as the fractures spread, and amidst the chaos, I felt the last vestiges of my resolve wavering. With one final cry of warning, the dark figure raised its twisted arms, summoning a wall of shadows to close in around me. And just before the darkness consumed me, the crack ripped wide, expelling an acrid vapor and a flash of blinding light that tore through the inky veil, revealing another world beneath the surface. Before I could process what I was witnessing, the specters shrieked in unison, and a force like a tidal wave surged forward. I was swept off my feet into nothingness, a gasp trapped in my throat as jagged forms of the lost souls seemed to chase after me. In midfall, vivid memories of my past raced back, including a chilling revelation that I couldn't ignore, the sacrifice I might have to make to break free of this horror. I plunged into the void. The spectral forms clawed at the light, and I plummeted backward into an abyss darker than the night, the air rich with regret. And just then, a face appeared before Mimi, own mingling with countless others, each one bearing the weight of a truth I was not yet prepared to face. A scream tore out of my chest, lost in the depth of darkness, as I realized that the shadows had merely been a warning. The true horror lay ahead. The void echoed with laughter, and as I plummeted deeper into the fathomless pit, the agonizing thought dawned upon me. This was only the beginning of an everlasting nightmare, and I was destined to be its harbinger. The gas station loomed before me, its familiar facade faded and worn, yet dripping with an unsettling vibrancy that sent chills across my skin. Stepping through the threshold felt both eerie and inevitable, as if the air itself was electrified by the weight of each memory. I had faced the horrific shadows and witnessed lives lost to the insatiable hunger of darkness. But still, there was something I needed to confront. I had come full circle, back to the place that had tethered me to this cycle of horror as I entered. Silence filled the air, an unnatural stillness coiling around me, reminding me of the many times I had succumbed to that malevolent grasp. The fluorescent lights flickered to life, just as they had that first night I worked here, casting grotesque shadows that loomed far greater than their source. The scent of diesel and decay was a familiar cloak that wrapped about me, unsettled yet strangely comforting that it was happening again. The whispers slithered through the aisles, drawing me in, and I found myself walking toward the back once more, the pull of the shadowy past too strong to resist. Each step resonated like a heartbeat, aching within the relentless drum of foreboding. "Join us," a voice called, arching through the darkness like a taunt, inviting and horrid. I was no longer the hollowed vessel they could draw power from. I was a seeker, desperately searching for an answer, a way to end this cursed cycle once and for all. That I hesitated at the entrance to the back room. The shadows stretched impossibly long, twisting into disfigured shapes that clawed at my resolve. But as I pushed through the door, the familiar altar met my eyes, draped in the essence of evil long dormant. I felt the locket nestled in my pocket, pulsing, a low thrum resonating with a heartbeat that echoed my own. Suddenly, it all rushed back, the faces of the lost ones, the children hoping for light, the despair of lives snuffed out by the insatiable hunger of the gas station. They had whispered to me, their secrets a cacophony of sorrow woven with a tale of inevitable loss. Each shadow had wanted freedom, and now that unwelcome weight seemed heavier than ever. Did I approach the altar, the glimmering locket glowing softly as I retrieved it from my pocket. In this placia, malignant cradle of bitterness and regret, I knew the price I had to pay. It was a truth I had wrestled with for far too long. What must I sacrifice? I demanded, the room thickening with expectation. "Just your light," a chorus of voices whispered, turning the air even colder. But before I could respond, shadows erupted from the corners, swirling around me in an all-consuming tempest, a vortex eager to claim more than just my light. "Enough?" I shouted, forcing myself to stand firm, planting my feet on the ground that felt alive beneath me. "I won't be your sacrifice again." I stood defiant, but in that very second, something cold enveloped my heart, a feeling deeper than dread, encapsulating an understanding far more horrifying than I could comprehend. The whispers escalated, the shadows writhing as if anticipating a feast. In that moment of panic, I remembered the faces I had seen, the family lost, the friends betrayed. "You don't want just my light," I cried out. "You want my essence, my unending torment." The swirling darkness grew wild, excited by the truth laid bare. With one desperate move, I fumbled the locket into position, staring into its surface that now reflected countless faces, familiar and yet distant, entrapped in sorrowful expression. The moment hung heavy with implications, a single pulse thrumming like a heartbeat against my palm. Truths clawing their way from the past. "Set them free," I screamed, feeling every ounce of determination surge through me, a powerful light anchoring against the tide of impending darkness. The shadows recoiled as if struck, and the air crackled with tension, the entire gas station vibrating, animated by the surge of my raw emotion. "That I will end this," I declared, realizing that breaking the cycle hinged not just on battling the shadows, but facing the darkest truth within myself, the choices I had made, the lights I had dimmed, And in this moment, the power I held to set the lost souls free, the ground began to shake violently, separating like a black fissure, swallowing remnants of the past. From the blackness, echoes of laughter rose, fierce and wild, cutting through the fabric of my resolve. But I would not yield. My heart surged with the desire to mend the past, to bring light to those I had wronged. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the locket, illuminating the shadows that cowered before me as the gas station trembled in response. The figures emerged, spectral forms shifting and swirling, now united where once they had been fractured, merging and melding as the light pulsed with burgeoning hope. In that fleeting moment, I witnessed their stories, each heartbreak woven into my own, each moment echoing the love they had lost, the light desperately fighting against the encroaching dark. But just as the vortex threatened to pull me into despair, I hurled the locket into the hearts of the shadows swirling around me. You are not to be bound by your own grief. Set yourselves free. In an explosion of brilliance, shadows erupted, dispersing like the exhaled breath of life, reaching out for freedom, consuming everything in their path. The gas station roared with the fury of their release, a whirlwind of spirits surging upward, breaking the chains of despair that had once anchored them to this place. As darkness fell away, I felt a searing pain grip my chest, pulling at the threads of my very soul, as if they clung to the shadows now streaming toward the light. I was being torn asunder, light collapsing within itself, exposing my own darkness, the embodiment of my fears and regrets, ready to ensnare me in their void. I gasped, bracing against the force that threatened to consume me. But as I confronted the real truth lurking within, there was no denying what they needed. I was to be their vessel, emptied of light, left with scars of sacrifice inflicted by my own hands, bound to the gas station forever. And as the gas station twisted beneath me, I felt a strange clarity. I turned my face skyward, and a voice, my own broken laughter, mingled with the winds, summoning echoes of the past. Stay. And momentarily, the shadows paused, trembling at the edge of oblivion. And then it happened. The last fragments of light slipped from my grasp, and the shadows surged in a final cataclysmic wave. My vision splintered, and I was swept away in darkness, bound, suffocated beneath my own misdeeds. And just as the weight of despair threatened to pull me entirely under, it all faded. The gas station was lost, the shadows consumed with a gluttony I could only wish I had fought against. Yet in my heart, I knew I would never escape the horror I had awakened. Now, I was just another shadow, a vessel for regret, eternally swept into the maelstrom with my darkness ever lurking, haunting every whisper that mingled with the gas station's breath. But deep within the silence, one final truth permeated. It was not the shadows that haunted me. It was the echoes of my own voice, endlessly whispering, "You've become one of us now."